Hey YouTube, it's the Grognard DM again. Continuing on with the train of thought that I had last time, which was talk about some of the other games that started in the expansion of the explosion, even of role-playing games in the 80s. I'm not going to talk much about the first science fiction role-playing game, Traveler. At least as far as I know, first science fiction. I can say that under correction. But it's the earliest one that I know of, and as one of my game store associates would say, it's D&D for adults. About the most I know about Traveler is that it was possible for you to die during character creation. Basically, you could continue having training packages and tours of duty behind you, but each time you did that, there was a chance that you meet with an unfortunate accident in the course of a mission or something like that, and you're dead. That's pretty much the extent of my knowledge of Traveler. I would love to try playing the game sometime. I believe it is still currently published. I'm not even sure what edition they're in now, but the last time I looked, I do believe they still had the old lady out there in publication. I'm going to save Star Trek for a later video, I think, because that's quite a story. It's probably just the first evolution facet itself is it would be a video unto itself because there's so much to go into on the FASA game. However, FASA lost the rights because Paramount was afraid that when they published canon characters, Kirk and Picard and whatnot, they didn't care about classic Trek, but Next Gen had just started running, and they came out with a source book with Picard and the rest of the Enterprise D crew, and they were afraid that game players would limit the writers by saying, oh no, they can't do that, which is why I want to actually talk about the D6 Star Wars instead. Very simple, very fast-paced game. This is West End Games production. I believe it was published in either 84 or 86, probably 86. And pretty much the adventures were written, set during the Galactic Civil War, which would be the core original trilogy, New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. It certainly is intended for Jedi to be very rare, and there is a reason for it. People talk about broken things in D&D. Yeah, let's talk about Jedi and the West End Games Star Wars. First of all, the basic mechanic is you have pools of six-sided dice. One die is declared your drama die. If you roll a 1 on that drama die, and it's part of your die pool, so if you're rolling 6 dice to do something, you've got 5 normal dice in your drama die. You can either simply take out your drama die and your highest die, or one of your highest die if you got a tie for that, and then just like in the example I said of 6 dice, figure the total of 4 dice. Or you can say a complication. I find it interesting in the rule book that every example for the GM to come up with a complication involves Han Solo. Yeah, for instance, rolling a 1 on the drama die, trying to con somebody, oh, we're all fine here, how are you? Or on a stealth roll, you happen to overlook the one really dry twig as you're sneaking up on a scout trooper on the forest moon of Endor. The 6 on the drama die, on the other hand, exploded. You counted that 6 in your die pool, and you rolled your drama die again, and so long as you kept rolling 6s, you kept adding and rolling. This gave somebody with a fairly low die pool, because it could go down to literally as low as 1 die, the chance to do something of even moderate difficulty, even though you only got the 1 die. Now, as I mentioned, difficulty. You're rolling your dice. you have a difficulty number. This is actually the first game that I personally played that had that. And so I wonder how much sometimes difficulty numbers or DCs got imported as an idea from Star Wars into D&D. I never played Chill, or there are several role-playing games I have not played, and so they very could easily predate Star Wars and have a difficulty number. But the big thing is that, for instance, if you're shooting, point blank range had a difficulty number, medium, long, and so on. You could do multiple actions in one round, but every action past your first one, you deducted one die from all your die codes on your character sheet. So if you had a character with a blaster of 10 dice, you could pop off several shots in one round and still have a chance of hitting all the targets you're shooting at. Now, to balance that out, it's one action at a time. So this blaster person shoots his first shot, and then everybody else takes their turn, including the bad guys. And then he gets to take his second shot, and anybody else that has second actions takes theirs, including the bad guys, so on and so forth. It's individual-based initiative, usually from highest to lowest in terms of dexterity code. So it wasn't like, okay, I'm laying waste with 7 blaster shots and there's only 3 bad guys left to take pot shots at my friend. No. You're firing 7 blaster shots. You're just taking one down at a time, but they still get a chance to do damage before they're all dead. Damage was done in a comparative fashion. The weapon had a certain die code, like most blaster pistols are 4 dice, Han Solo's heavy blaster is 5 dice, a lightsaber's 5 dice. And the person being hit rolls the number of dice he has in his strength attribute. When you compare the two numbers, if the number is higher, that person is going to at least be injured, but at least be stunned. 0 to 3 is stunned. But the higher it is, up to 16, the worse it is. 16, you're killed outright. They had scaling as well, so that if I'm shooting you with the laser cannon on my speeder bike, and I'm shooting at you as a character, there's more dice that I can roll for my damage against your little strength die. They're usually 2 to 3 dice. By the bigger it was, and the bigger it was, the harder it was. The damage, the harder it hit. So each level of scale gave you basically a die or a multiple of dice. So a character that was shooting at the Death Star, the scale factor is 24 dice. No, 12 dice, excuse me. Death Star has 24 dice for its body, which is for vehicles, your strength. So I'm firing my little heavy blaster pistol with 5 dice against the Death Star rolling 36 dice. The 24 dice body plus a 12 dice in scale difference. There's an advantage to that. If the Death Star fires at me, it's also at minus 12 dice on its super laser. Of course, that begs the question of why does it need to hit the character? All it has to do is hit the planet the character's standing on. But just using extremes as an example. There were force points that you could accumulate through play. Force points were ways to urge you to kind of be heroic. When you spent a force point, and you could, if you were running a character that didn't believe in the force, I'm trusting to my luck. Whatever you want to excuse it. But you burn a force point, and for that one round, every die code on your character sheet is doubled. So that guy with 10 dice and blaster now has 20, and everything else, and including your strength in case you have to resist some damage rolls. The only caveats on that was Weapon codes, things that were not innate to the character, did not double. So Han Solo, trusting to his luck, burns a force point. His 5-die heavy blaster pistol does not suddenly do 10 dice. Or Luke Skywalker's lightsaber. Come back to that in a moment. So that means you could do incredibly difficult things. Difficulty classes went up to sometimes 40. And that would enable your average character to do something incredibly heroic and succeed at it because of the force points. Now, there are consequences that can happen when you burn a force point. If you burn a force point to do something evil, you lose that force point. It does not come back to you at the end of the adventure. And you gain a dark side point. Dark side points are serious business in the West End games version of Star Wars. As a game master, if I award you a dark side point, I immediately roll a 6-sided die. If my roll is under your dark side point total, your character just became an NPC because you just got consumed by the dark side and now are a villain. That meant basically your first dark side point was a freebie, a warning shot, and after you got your 7th dark side point, I really didn't need to roll. Give me your character sheet. Now, there was a possibility to run a redemption arc for a character that is at least tainted by the dark side. Once he's consumed, that's tougher, and you definitely need a Jedi involved. But to get rid of one dark side point, you've got to consecutively, over the course of the next 3 adventures, at least once, consciously say, I'm trying to do the right thing. And actually, that has to be a right thing. You can't just simply say it and make it a right thing. So I'm consciously trying to do the right thing. I'm going to save these little Ewoks that are being menaced by a Rancor, as an example. After doing 3 consecutive adventures doing that, you get rid of 1 dark side point. Now, if you fail to remember to do that, say in your 2nd adventure, it resets to 1 adventure. So you've got to really be, if you want to get rid of dark side points, you have to work for it. So they're really kind of deadly in this game because you could very easily wind up losing your character. Going back to burning force points. If you burn a force point for something that's not necessarily evil, but very self-centered, like you're taking a whole bunch of fire, so you want your strength die code to be doubled against all these incoming attacks, or you want to get personal gain, I'm going to burn a force point so that I can win a whole bunch of money playing Sabak. It's not really evil, but it's not really heroic. So again, you lose the dark side point, or the dark side point, the force point, but you don't get a dark side point for that. If you burn a force point doing something heroic, you get it back at the end of the adventure. If you burn the force point at a dramatically appropriate moment, that's very much a DMD sort of thing. I know some DMs that when they pre-published their adventures, they had them in specific chapters. And so at the climax of each chapter, if somebody burned a force point during that climax, they would get the results. I know some DMs that would just once every adventure. But you would get your force point back at the end of the adventure, and you'd get another one. I'm pretty good at sensing dramatic timing, and so my player character, last time we played, he was up to around 7 or 8 force points, which was training to be a Jedi, so it kind of fit anyway. Now, force points. There are hero points that gets a little bit more esoteric. I very seldom character points. Character points in the course of the adventure because I like to bank them so that I could improve my character. They have 2 functions. In between adventures, you can use them to improve your character. During the adventure, you can use them to improve some of your die codes. Now, I mentioned the Jedi are kind of broken in this. Jedi learn force skills. And as a result of those 4 skills, they can do all kinds of things that ordinary people have little to no defense against. But the thing that really breaks them is a power called lightsaber combat. There's a skill called lightsaber you can build and become very proficient with a lightsaber. A Jedi using activating the power lightsaber combat gets to add his die code for his sense power to his lightsaber to determine his chances to hit or parry. You use lightsaber to parry incoming attacks as well. And his control dice get added to his lightsaber die code. So let's say you've got a Jedi Master. Usually most people consider that to be about 11 dice that played the game. Now, you're activating a power that takes 2 skills, control and sense. There's a 3rd Jedi skill, alter. That's not important right now. You're using lightsaber. So right there's 3 skills. So everything's at -2 dice. So you're adding 9 dice to your lightsaber skill. That's also at -2 dice. And you're adding 9 dice to the 5 dice of the damage if you hit, which your damage codes don't go down. So let's say he had 11 dice in lightsabers. So you got 18 dice to swing that lightsaber once. And if he hits, he's rolling 14 dice. This is why Jedi cut through bulkheads. And then, of course, if he's burning force point, well, that's 18 dice plus 18 dice. There's 36 dice for that. And then 18 plus 5, 23 dice for the damage. So, yeah, they get broken really quick. Now, of course, that example's, I'm swinging once. I'm not parrying any time. I'm only swinging the one time. So we're not even talking about lightsaber duels at this point. That tamps them back down if there's another Jedi running around. But if he just wants to cut through a bulkhead, he's going to cut through pretty darn quickly. The other advantage that Jedi have, of course, everybody knows about deflecting the blaster bolt back. That's not even an attack with your lightsaber, technically speaking. You are using your lightsaber code, but you don't need to roll damage, because what you're doing is you're using your sense plus your lightsaber to intercept the bolt, and then if you're going to send it right back at the shooter, you make another sense roll, which is a skill roll, so there goes another die, right back at that person. If you hit, then you're doing the damage of the blaster type that was firing at you. So you don't really have to worry about lower damage thresholds like you do in a lightsaber duel. You just have more bolts that you might have to parry. So that's kind of a cool point. Another fun historical point with this aspect of the game is that when George Lucas hired Timothy Zahn to write his acclaimed Thrawn trilogy, which gave us the introduction of an absolutely wonderful, deliciously vile villain in the Star Wars canon that we're going to see now. We saw him already in the animated Rebels series, and we're going to see him now, obviously, in Ahsoka, the forthcoming series, Grand Admiral Thrawn. And basically he sent a note along with saying, if you want to get a feel for this universe that I've created, read this game. So apparently the makers at West End Games really, really got several things right in George Lucas's mind as far as the flavor and the style, and it is a very fast-paced game. You can run combat very quickly, even mass combat. And so you're able to run a combat that maintains a certain tension, like you saw in the movies. So it is a very immersive experience sometimes. The There are all kinds of little codicils, like, if non-sensitives can't learn the ways of the Force, they're capped at 5 Force points. Every Force point they get after that turns into character points or hero points. No, character points. I have DC heroes on my mind as well, and those were hero points. But where we run into what I was referring earlier with the reason why FASA lost the rights to publish Star Trek is if you just look at the movies and you read the rules for the West End Games role-playing game, there are very clearly defined uses of the Force that get you dark side points. If you do injure kill as a power, choking somebody, that's an automatic dark side point. Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack. And this brings us to something that Lucas himself introduced with the Episode 1 Phantom Menace. Now, for the most part, we only saw this being used against droids, but since then it has been used in various Star Wars media against living organisms. Force push. Some of them pretty clearly intended to damage rather than just create some space. So a lot of people are like, wait a minute, he's got a dark side point because he just hurt somebody using the Force. Yeah, storytelling. The D20 version that WotC put out when they put out 3.0 kind of addressed that. Force push is very minor. It doesn't even do lethal damage. It does non-lethal damage if it's damaging at all. So therefore, it's straddling the line between using telekinesis to pick someone up, throw them off a cliff, or to crush their windpipe, which is sometimes called telekinetic kill in West End games. The other thing that they did that got a lot of people with the J.J. Abrams trilogy upset was lightsabers are supposed to actually be very difficult to use. In West End games, the difficulty number to swing a lightsaber and hit somebody and cause damage to them was a 20. So you had to roll your Dex dice pool or whatever you had in lightsaber and hit a 20 or better, which means on average you needed to have at least 5 dice to have a little over a 50% chance of hitting that threshold. And if you miss that number by 10 or more, which isn't necessarily a DC of 10, because if I parry your lightsaber stroke, my parry just became your new difficulty number. So if you missed it by 10 or more, it bounced back and hit you, and you take the damage from that lightsaber. So that made General Grievous a little bit more, whoa, because he's not a Force user. And he's attacking Obi-Wan Kenobi with 4 lightsabers at once. So -3 on all those dice, just as he's taking one attack swing at Kenobi each round. And he's not hitting himself, so he's obviously highly skilled. But then you get somebody in J.J. Abrams, somebody completely untrained, actually 2 characters in his first movie, picking up a lightsaber and actually using it with some effect in combat. Well, again, it's story writing, and when people are creating canon, or at least what generally would be considered canon, that is going to supersede any game rule. Now, an individual game master can say, yeah, but not in my game. What Disney doesn't know, it won't hurt Disney. Myself as a DM, I completely ignore the J.J. Abrams. First of all, I found them pathetic scripts. First 2 were pretty much rewrites of the original trilogy. And second of all, that wasn't Luke Skywalker. He may have been called Luke Skywalker, but even Mark Hamill agreed it wasn't his Luke Skywalker. So yeah, the characterizations are bad enough. It's an alternative reality. It's in my head. I like the original idea that Lucas had the Yuuzhan Vong who were immune to the Force. That's a galactic threat. That would have been. I would have loved to have seen movies made based on the Yuuzhan Vong threat. So at any rate, I've nattered on enough about the D6 Star Wars. It is a fun game, and I'm not going to say anything against the D20 version of Star Wars. It is fun in its own way. You don't have to worry about becoming a dark side character nearly as quickly, because it's like D&D, only it's Star Wars, and so you've got a wisdom score. If you get half as many dark side points as your wisdom, you're tainted, and if you hit your wisdom score with dark side points, then you're consumed by the dark side, but it's easy to get rid of dark side points. So it's just kind of more of a dramatic storytelling point than it is actually a game mechanic, as far as I'm concerned. But you know, it's the fun of the D20 Star Wars, which is now, I guess, Saga. I haven't played it in a while, but the fun of it is it's like playing D&D, only you've got Star Wars. I remember using D&D back in the 80s to run Star Wars games, and lightsabers, I think, attacked as a longsword and did 4d10 damage. I think that, if I recall the stats correctly. So, you know, you just use D&D. Well, 20 years later, people use D&D to play Star Wars. Rocks my world. So, at any rate, I will start on the Star Trek series on my next video, focusing primarily on FASA this time. And unless I hear something that's more intriguing in comments or direct messages, I will see you on the next video, and may all your hits be crits.